So one of the few things having a giant collection of axes is good for is to help identify patterns. And I perceive there's some gap in the axosphere of knowledge of how to identify or tell apart a Connecticut pattern and a Tasmanian pattern. So here's a little public service announcement, just using all these axes for the greater cause of good and axe knowledge. If there is any company in the world that gets to claim a definitive Tasmanian pattern, it is going to be High Test, an Australian company. And so these four here, these are Australian-made Tasmanian patterns. High Test Forge Tools 4-pounder, High Test Forester, High Test Forge Tools 4.5-pounder, and this is a Trojan Cyclone, kind of a hardware store axe that I haven't even started a project, probably never finish it. But anyways, so what you can see here, this is like, if there's a claim to what a Tasmanian pattern is, I'd look to the Australians because that's what it was made for. It was a head specially designed, in theory, for Australian hardwoods, and it has certain distinctive features, and all kinds of companies made them. Okay, we'll look at several that were made for export, you know, by great Swedish and German manufacturers to sell in Australia. So in the heyday of Australian forestry, this was a big deal, right? And this was the pattern of choice for serious, you know, work in the forests. All right. Here are some Tasmanian patterns that European makers made for export. Plum Champion, Vibelos, made in Germany, 4.5-pounder. Holtzbrook, okay, made lots and lots of Tassies under the Agdor line, all right, and Arvika 5-star, a lot of that toe jam right there. This is a Vetterlings, a Swedish Vetterlings, hard to find those. Another Plum, and this is a Gilpin, actually made in England, you know, so Australia was a Commonwealth nation, it was part of the British Empire, so a lot of the English manufacturers made Tasmanian patterns for export. Sounds like a big potluck or something at the park next door. Super cool. The only two companies making a Tasmanian pattern today that I know of is Holtzbrook in Sweden and Helkowerk in Germany. Still make a production level, large quantity that they market openly as a Tasmanian pattern. And you see that I think that's very interesting because, you know, these are professionals and they're claiming to keep this pattern alive. So what were the features that they picked out and said, this is Tasmanian, this is what we're going to make. So and they're very much in the classic, you know, kind of Australian style of Tasmanian. From the side you could say these were Connies, but there's a lot of distinctive features. There's just very much up the aisle there. Holtzbrook doing its Holtzbrook thing. Their Tasmanian has always flared towards the edge. It just doesn't even flare. Whereas more of the High Test style you can see here in the Helco, okay, with more slope here on the heel and a little flatter maybe on the toe, but that's not the defining feature. That's not it. It's other things. On the Connie side, what you see is a lot of American manufacturers. Okay, so first and foremost, the Connecticut is really a North American pattern. Do not see a lot of foreign manufacturers making a Connecticut and selling it in the United States. So these were mainly made by American companies. And so we have 5 Connies here. This is a True Temper World's Finest, True Temper registered with a beautiful laminated handle. Look at this laminated handle. Shout out to Cody. Dude, that's good work. Collins Legitimus, probably a late one. True Temper Red Warrior. And then a Kelly Black Raven, one of the ones from like the 40s and the 50s. And so from the side, it looks a lot like a Tasmanian, doesn't it? I mean, from the profile, it is very difficult to tell. There's no hard and fast rule with the sweep of the, you know, the toe here. I see them all kinds of different ones. The Connecticut's are far more uniform when you find them than Tasmanians. We have all kinds of different things, different angles, different poles, a lot of variation. And Connecticut's just tend to be a lot more on script. I would say there's 3 things that really separate Connies and Tassies. First, the weight of the head actually matters, just because of what the typical weight of each pattern historically was. It'll help you, you know, identify which one you have. The second thing is the width of the cheeks, the thickness of the axe, you know, from the top down. How thick is that axe? Connies are very thin, Tassies are very thick. And then the third thing, because of the thickness of the cheeks, is really the edge geometry, the shape of the bit down to the edge, are usually very different. So how do you tell these two patterns apart? Okay, well, I think the first clue, and this is, I'm serious, is the weight. Just what is the weight of the head? So Connecticut's, you'll find 3-pounders, but most of them, the vast majority that were manufactured, seem to be 3.5 pounds. That was like the average weight, the ideal weight for what people at the time wanted, like a 30 or a 32-inch handle. And it's a great, these are amazing axes. They perform outstanding, really. The Connecticut is such a great feller. It's such a great just cutter. And these, you know, these thin cheeks will go into the other features, but it really does make a great cut. And so, but 4-pounders, 5-pounders, very rare. They exist in the catalogs, okay, and you can find them, but they're a lot more rare. You know, the average weight was 3.5 pounds, and I say that because it's very different than Tasmanians. Tasmanians are big boys. These are big axes, all right? You can find 3.5 pounds, but if 3-pounders exist, I don't know about it. Love to hear your comments if they exist. I'm sure they do. Someone made them. But 4.5, and 5 pounds for a Tasmanian pattern is the expected weight. That's what they wanted and thought. It's not an exception to the rule. That is the rule. 4.5 pounds. So, I mean, right away, that's a big difference, okay? If you can identify the manufacturer as a North American manufacturer, and it weighs 3.5 pounds or 3 pounds, okay, right away, it's like, that's probably a Connecticut. And if you have one of these, you know, foreign jobs, and it's 4.5, 5 pounds, and it looks like that, we're pretty close that is a Tasmanian just from the weight, because the other weights are really, really rare. And maybe you have the one, like, well, I found a 3-pound plum champion. You know, it's amazing. That is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. You should post pics, because I want to see it. That's outstanding. Where does the Tasmanian pattern put the weight? Puts it in the cheeks. That's where that weight is. That extra pound is in the cheeks. So you find a Connie. A Connie is a very slim axe. It has a very slim cheek, all right? Almost a hollow sometimes, or it's like sweeping up, okay? But the point is, it's thin, all right? And so you call that, it has a low center line, all right, in the center here. It makes the edges extremely, extremely elegant and great, you know, great penetration, but not as much splitting action. And the Tasmanians have a very high center line. They're very thick. There's a very thick cheeks, okay? And the idea there was that extra weight and that extra angle threw out chips, right? It went into the wood and it threw out the chips, which I guess was great on spotted gum and jarrah and all the woods they had down there. Number 3 is the edge geometry, and really where the steel meets the wood. I like this World's Finest here because it's pretty close to factory condition. This is pretty close to what it was when it got bought. There, we talked about profile. See this long slimming profile, very slim, okay, going down. And this one is great for illustrating what I think, you know, what I have seen as a typical factory grind is kind of a, you know, there's a secondary relief bevel, you know, about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. It's not very severe. It's quite gentle. This slopes down on a convex grind to the edge, okay? But it's thin, and usually these are like 30 degrees or 32.5 degrees. That's what you find them in, and they can go much lower. But that's your typical Connie has an edge like that. For the Tassie, if this Holtzbrook Agdor has been used, I can't tell. It's been restored by my good friend Chris Wallace in Queensland, Australia, right? So I know its origin. It's from Australia. He made it for me and I love it very much. But what my point is, this is pretty much factory grind, all right? This is very much how it was. It's just been polished up and made to look really nice, okay? And what you have down here is a 45-degree inclusive angle or edge angle. 45 degrees. That's like splitting maul level, okay? very, very typical. Very, very typical. The Connies come a lot thinner and probably more use ready than the high test. The high test come with these big, big, beefy 35 and 45 degree edge angles. And it was just expected that the user would know how to modify that and make it much sharper, right? It was just expected you're going to put work into it. So it came that way, and it's just probably a result of the forging process and the costs of this big extra weight up here in the cheek translates down into, you know, that's the way the geometry at the edge would be, okay? So there you go. These are beautiful axes. Fantastic pattern, definitely my favorite. That's why I have so many. So weight, girth, and that bevel geometry. I think that's the best way. It's not really poles. It's not really, you know, the angles or the, you know, the slope of the profile. It really isn't. They come in all sizes. So hope this was insightful, and like and share if so.